Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, welcome back to a brand new series. We are reading the biography on King Henri Christophe, one of the greatest black men to ever walk the face of the earth. Welcome to part 11. In part 1, we discuss the origins. Where did he come from? Part 2, we discuss where was he in the first days of the revolution. Part 3, we discuss the rise to power. Part 4, we discuss the French invasion of 1802. Part 5, we discuss the various battles of the revolution leading up to the victorious climax. Part 6, we discuss the first 2 years of the Haitian state after the revolution, the construction of the Citadel, one of the greatest architectural achievements the black man ever produced, the Dessalines administration and the Dessalines assassination, the precursor to the nation being divided into 2 states. Part 7, we discuss the 1807 Civil War between Christophe's northern faction and the southern mulatto faction after the death of Dessalines. We also discuss the beginning stages of Christophe's navy, right? From the time that he purchased his first warship back in 1807, and then building up a fleet of more than 7 warships, which he purchased straight cash, no loans. Part 8, we discuss the coronation ceremony of 1811, one of the most legendary events that took place in the world that year. We also discuss the consolidation of Christophe's power as the supreme leader of the North. Part 9, we discuss the first few years of the kingdom, the rebuilding of the state, the various domestic and international conflicts, the capture and execution of a French spy back in 1814, and a massive national celebration for the Queen of Haiti back in 1815. Part 10, we discuss the French government making a second failed attempt at opening negotiations with Christophe. We also discuss the death of Alexander Pichon back in 1818, right? Christophe's arch rival. He passed away in 1818. We also discuss a scandal that Christophe was involved in when news got back to the British government that a British merchant by the name of Davison was locked up and tortured inside the Citadel for espionage, right? We also discuss the high-level medical and educational system that Christophe managed to establish during his time in power. Long live the king, man. Long live the king. Now, at this stage of the game, in this stage of the book, Christophe, he about like 50 years old right now, right? So we done made it to, from the beginning. We started when he was a child. Now, welcome to part 11. Christophe about 50 years old now. Now, let's get back into the book, man. He was 50 years old and at the height of his power. And of the 7 generals who had commanded army divisions under Dessalines and signed Haiti's Declaration of Independence, he was now the only one left alive. Pichon's successor as president of the Republic was Jean-Pierre Boyer. While awaiting news about what the change in leadership in Port-au-Prince would bring, Christophe took a 3-month tour of the kingdom to remind his subjects of the power and splendor of the crown. The royal progress was described in the homeliest of terms, with the king in the midst of his people, dispensing his bounty and chatting familiarly with the farmers. Everyone could go and quench his thirst in the wine that flowed at discretion. In Port-au-Prince, Christophe oversaw the mass wedding of several hundred soldiers, paying for the wedding banquet from his own purse. Shortly afterwards, his son was encouraged to step further into his role as Prince Royal by overseeing a military review. In Saint-Marc, the royal party stopped so that Christophe could spend time considering relations with his southern neighbors. His pride prevented him from addressing Boyer directly, as if to do so would admit his legitimacy. Instead, he decided to exploit what he hoped were divisions he might find in the new regime. Vasty was encouraged to begin a correspondence with the Republican Secretary of State, Joseph Insignac, with whom he had once served under Dessalines, hoping to rekindle their old friendship. Christophe also met with a foreigner named Shaw from Port-au-Prince, who reported that Republican army elements led by an anonymous colonel were ready to throw their lot in with the kingdom and help foster a counter-revolution. Over the previous 2 years, there had been a small number of defections to the kingdom, including a lieutenant colonel who had been awarded with the Order of St. Henri, so this was music to Christophe's ears. Christophe issued a proclamation to the people of the West and the South, referring obliquely to Pichon as having been the only obstacle to our reunion, and calling on them to join the new order of things, which shall be just and reasonable, honorable and advantageous for all. As he had done before, he confirmed that all property rights and army ranks would be respected and promised the most splendid rewards and honors to those who would recognize him as the king. To deliver his message, he sent 3 envoys south with a letter to the general and magistrates of Port-au-Prince, commenting that if our overtures have not been crowned with all the success we had hoped for, we had the satisfaction at least of believing that this was not owing to any fault of ours. As in 1816, his approach did not go down well. "We are free, independent, and Republicans," the generals and magistrates said. "We will maintain our rights at the hazard of our lives against all who invade them, wherever they appear and whoever they may be. We have already explained ourselves. No communication, no correspondence. We do not wish to have anything in common with General Christophe or with his royalty." The king departed immediately for the palace. In Gonaives, Shaw offered to sail to the town of Jérémie with papers signed by Christophe to encourage a mutiny there, but if the plan was ever enacted, it was not recorded by the archive. The split between Haiti's north and south looked as permanent as ever. The rejection of the royal envoys by the Republic was perhaps no surprise to Christophe, but 8 weeks later, he was shaken by events far closer to home. On the 25th of August, the great stone mast of the Citadel was shaken when a bolt of lightning struck a temporary powder magazine. The resulting blast was heard from the palace. When Christophe hurried to the scene, the garrison was in complete disarray. Several buildings were destroyed in the resulting fire, and the flames were approaching the main magazine where 500,000 pounds of gunpowder was stored, threatening to cause an explosion that would have reduced the fort to a crater. Christophe's energetic intervention helped extinguish the fire and save the Citadel, but the bodies of 159 men were left in the ashes. One of these men was the Citadel's governor, Prince Noel, Queen Marie-Louise's brother. Christophe said, "If the damage the lightning had done to the Citadel had been 1,000 times greater, I would regard it as nothing had my dear brother been preserved." Noel had been a close confidant of the king. He had fought in the revolution, and in 1810 had been mentioned in dispatches for his role in the capture of Mont-Saint-Nicolas. He may even have helped in the original construction of the Citadel, a fact for which he was rewarded with his governorship after Christophe's coronation. Noel's death was the second family member that Christophe and his wife had lost in a year. In July 1817, his wife's nephew, Prince Jean, died near Gonaives after a long illness. His remains were interred in the royal chapel at the palace, where they would soon be joined by those of his uncle. Jean's death was mourned, but Julien Prévost regarded Noel's death as an irreparable loss that particularly afflicted Christophe. Repairs began on the Citadel with great urgency. Prévost was conscious of how news of the explosion would be exploited, and wrote to Thomas Clarkson to assure him that, God be thanked, the Citadel still remains capable of offering a stout resistance. I am acquainting you with these sad details so that you can reassure our friends. Our enemies will not fail to represent this misfortune as infinitely more disastrous than it really was. Indeed, the L'Abeille newspaper portrayed the explosion as a mortal blow against the monarchy, suggesting that 3/4 of the Citadel had been leveled and the royal treasury had been scattered, along with the deaths of an infinity of soldiers and prisoners shackled in their cells. Now, that was the L'Abeille newspaper. I believe that was a newspaper from the Southern Haitian Republicans. You know, like I said, you know, the constant slander, exaggeration, lies, fabrication, you know. You already know, man. Anyway, let's get back into it. When Prévost wrote to Clarkson, the correspondence between the king and his English advisor was reaching its height. Christophe was seeking advice about the current state of French politics in light of news that the Allied occupation of France was soon to end. Clarkson was emphatic in his belief that France's war debts and shrunken navy meant that the likelihood of aggressive moves against Haiti were minimal. This belief was bolstered when he attended the Congress of Aix-la-Chapelle in October, where representatives of the Allied nations who had defeated Napoleon Bonaparte in Europe gathered to draw a final line under the wars first begun by revolutionary France in 1792. Clarkson wrote to Christophe that he had discussed the matter with the Duke of Wellington, who had agreed with him that the French dream of recreating an enslaved Saint-Domingue was a fantasy. Furthermore, Clarkson had met with Tsar Alexander of Russia and taken the liberty of showing him a number of Christophe's letters to impress upon him the progress being made by the kingdom, and how much more it could achieve if the specter of a French invasion was permanently lifted. The Russian Tsar was impressed. To see a person rising up in the midst of slavery and founding a free empire was of itself a surprising thing, he told Clarkson, but to see Christophe founding it on the pillars of education under Christian auspices was more surprising and truly delightful. Christophe was thrilled when Clarkson suggested that he should write to King Alexander directly, which would be arranged courtesy of the Russian ambassador in London. This was the first time he had been invited to open a correspondence with another monarch. A letter was drafted, but Christophe seemed uncharacteristically hesitant before allowing it to be delivered and sought further reassurance from Clarkson. Christophe said, "I'm sending you this dispatch unsealed, Please read it, my friend, and if you judge that it may be sent to him, I beg you to forward to his destination." Clarkson approvingly replied that the Russian ambassador would include it in the next diplomatic dispatch to St. Petersburg. In the opening of his letter, Christophe said, "Fame has spread to the most distant countries the report of the noble and generous feelings with which your imperial and royal majesty is inspired towards all nations. The universal benevolence has excited my admiration, which has been increased by the accounts I've received from our worthy friend Mr. Clarkson of the humane and beneficent disposition of your imperial and royal majesty towards the Africans and their descendants, the Haitians. My gratitude and respect for your virtues has inspired me with the desire of addressing this letter to your imperial and royal majesty as a tribute which I feel justly due." In his letter, Christophe recounted the story of the revolution and the moral purpose his throne had endowed him, before linking the struggle for Haitian sovereignty with the battle to save Europe from the ravages of the French army. Christophe said, "In the bloody contest that your majesty has had to support against the unjust aggression of France, we have not ceased to offer our prayers for the success of your arms, and we cherish the hope that when a general pacification took place in Europe, the people of Haiti would have partaken with the other nations in the blessings of peace, instead of which, for 16 years, we have been obliged to be continually on the watch until our independence should be acknowledged by France." Other points raised by Clarkson in his letters were less favorably received, including his suggestion for a reapproachment with Port-au-Prince. Press reports were circulating that Boyer had approached France for a political settlement, which Clarkson cautioned could end badly for Christophe should the king maintain an aggressive posture against his rival. Clarkson said, "If France should guarantee his independence and your majesty should afterwards see occasion to fight with him, he will call in the French army to his assistance, and you will then see French armies finding a safe and easy passage through his territories and into yours." He also suggested repeatedly that the size of the Haitian army should be reduced. Christophe rejected this out of hand, but did concede that one idea of Clarkson's contained merit, that part of the army should be reorganized into a militia, allowing troops to be released for cultivation. Christophe said, "This measure has an unusual appeal for me. Even before the reception of your letter, I had already sent a certain number of soldiers, older men and the physically unfit, into agriculture." Christophe could only hope that guarantees against France would allow him to do more. Christophe had already started to think about agricultural reform, but his initial actions have been very limited. Between April and July 1817, Christophe issued several edicts to reorganize state land. Considerable tracts of fertile plantation land had remained uncultivated, and these former properties of the former colonials, as Vasty put it, were put up for sale. As part of the process, their colonial names were abandoned and new names recorded on the deed of sale. One plantation at Grand-Pré was renamed La Victoire, and the coffee plantations that had formed part of the once notorious Galiflet estates became Belle Avenue. As Christophe told Clarkson, "I'm trying insofar as I can to augment the number of property owners by granting equally to all Haitians, whatever be their rank or station in life, the right to purchase land, plantations, and houses. I have given special consideration to the heads of families and to the most laborious and deserving tillers of the soil." In fact, many of the properties were initially gifted directly to the crown. In 1817, civil lists listed all the properties now under royal control. The king personally owned 10 palaces, including Sanssouci, and one for each city in the kingdom, along with the same number of chateaux, and a further 16 coffee plantations, 6 cotton plantations, 4 horse studs, and 6 cattle farms. The civil list also granted him an annual endowment of 1 million goudes for the maintenance of crown properties. The rest of the royal family were equally rewarded. Queen Maya Louise was granted 120,000 goudes per year to maintain her 13 chateaux and 4 horse studs. His son had 16 chateaux and 200,000 goudes, while his sisters were given 60,000 goudes and had a similar number of houses and plantations. With the stroke of the pen, the royal family became the biggest private landowner in the country. For those without recourse to the royal treasury, land could be purchased on credit, with the price of the plantation held against future taxes and a revenue sharing of produce mandated by the Code Henri. It appeared to work. In January 1818, the Royal Gazette of Haiti published a list of 4 sugar plantations, 154 coffee plantations, and 21 cotton plantations that had successfully been bid on after being offered for sale, inviting their new owners to claim their deeds from the Land Commission. Of these properties, just 13 were acquired by existing members of the nobility, of which 2 were sugar plantations, suggesting that only those close to power had the wherewithal to run such labor-intensive agriculture. A small handful of the properties went to army or civil officers, but the vast majority went to private citizens. It was a result that delighted Christophe, who wrote to Clarkson that while the reforms were aimed at all Haitians, irrespective of their rank or station in life, special consideration had been given to the heads of families and to the most laborious and deserving tillers of the soil. This measure has already had the most fortunate effects on our agriculture and has fulfilled all my expectations. The need to broaden land ownership perhaps spoke to a slowly dawning recognition of the tensions that had lain at the heart of Haiti's agricultural economy since independence. Tenant farmers remained tied to their plantations. For some, their labor was ever more tightly governed. As coffee production continued to grow in importance, new strict rules were introduced for the cultivation. Many farmers responded by simply absconding. The kingdom was large and sparsely populated in places, and despite the best efforts of the royal endowment troops and royal magistrates, there was plenty of space for people to disappear into the landscape and cultivate their own plots unmolested by the authorities. In the latter part of Christophe's reign, their number was said rather to have increased than diminished, said an English traveler who was hosted by a Maroon after becoming lost on the road. The Maroon told his guests that he had fought against the French, but fell silent when asked how many others there were like him in the vicinity. The Maroon was reportedly a generous host, providing the traveler with a breakfast of homegrown plantains and cassava, grooming his horse and accompanying him on a trail back to the capital before retreating to his hidden farm. Despite this, the writer could only see the Maroon's abandonment of character as a disappointing contrast to the plantation farmers. The rejection of state-organized labor in favor of total independence represented by the subsistence plot was a concept that baffled him. Prince Saunders came up with his own plan for increasing the number of property-owning farmers. In December 1818, he gave a speech in Philadelphia to the American Convention for promoting the abolition of slavery and improving the condition of the African race, in which he called for African Americans to escape the fear of bondage by emigrating to the free soil of Haiti. Prince Saunders told the audience, "God, in the most mysterious operation of his providence, has seen fit to permit the most astonishing changes to transpire upon that naturally beautiful and astonishingly luxuriant island." But Saunders was aware that an American audience would not necessarily be sympathetic to the idea of being ruled by a king. So instead, he dedicated a significant portion of his speech to his hope that the two halves of Haiti would soon be reconciled with each other. He said, "If the two rival governments of Haiti were consolidated into one well-balanced Pacific power, there are many hundreds of the free people in New England and the Middle States who will be glad to repair there immediately to settle." Saunders had not proposed his plan to Christophe, but risked his displeasure by referring even-handedly to both the king and the president. By July the following year, Christophe seems to have received a hint of Saunders' tone and warned Clarkson that he had left Haiti under a cloud. "I feel that I owe you this word of warning in case he should take advantage of you, using my name. We dealt with him most generously during his stay with us." Clarkson had in fact already written to Christophe to suggest that the Philadelphia abolitionists should join with him to make Haiti a safe asylum for the free people of color who may choose to immigrate there. The numbers of potential immigrants were so large, he believed, that he even floated a bizarre plan whereby the United States would be persuaded to purchase Santo Domingo and then cede the island to Christophe for the new arrivals to settle on. Saunders' departure from his position as a teacher in Christophe's employment to pursue his plans for African American immigration showed the difficulties of attracting foreigners to the kingdom's schools. Thomas Gulliver thrived in the capital, and Saunders' replacement in Port-au-Prince was found drunk at midday by Christophe himself during his royal tour. Despite this, the education program was judged to be a great success. One Briton traveling in the north some years after Christophe's death and the subsequent closure of his schools remarked on the high levels of education he frequently encountered, including a basic proficiency in English, which he put down to the agreeable institutions of the king. The Archbishop Cornel Brel had fallen from grace with Christophe. The rift appeared to have started in late 1816, when Christophe wrote a strident complaint to Brel accusing him of embezzlement. Since the earliest days of independence, European visitors had noted that Brel was an eager attendee of banquets and quick with a song, but now it was said that he rarely carried out clerical visits, and when he did, it was ostensibly for the purpose of baptizing children and marrying, but in reality for the collection of his fees. Fees levied on the masses might have been one thing, but when he demanded the 500 goudes from the family of the recently dead Comte de Toul for his funeral, Christophe was outraged. He said, "If the cost of the funeral does not come down, especially for the funeral of dignitaries, it will be better for the family that the deceased dignitaries be interred without the benefits of a church service, because those services, which they can do well without, will reduce them to beggars. It's enough to make one a Huguenot or even an atheist." When rumors spread that Brel was sympathetic to Louis XVIII's approach towards Haiti, he was stripped of his ecclesiastical title and placed under house arrest in the capital for preaching subversive doctrines. He was subsequently kept under a regime of ever-dwindling rations until he died from scurvy in July 1819. Even Christophe's supporters sometimes had cause to comment on his punishment of notables like Brel, not least on the sometimes apparently arbitrary nature with which he could mete them out. Several observers noted that even a figure as powerful as the governor of the capital, Jean-Pierre Richard, was not immune to censure. For offending the king by correctly performing a duty, but varying in several places from Christophe's instructions without authorization, he was imprisoned in the Citadel for several months. Here, he was compelled to associate with the workmen and even to assist in their labors before being restored to his rank and office. The punishment was so extraordinary that it was still retold as a folktale in the region more than a century later by peasant farmers. Other old acquaintances met an even harsher fate. In 1802, the merchant, Vilton, godfather to Christophe's daughters, had tried to persuade him to surrender to the French. He had remained in Haiti after independence, maintaining sufficient rank to have been signatory to the Pledge of Allegiance given to Christophe. But after being accused of having an affair with the mysterious countess and put under official surveillance after gifting her brandy, almonds, and prunes, he was put to death. What happened to the adulterous countess was not recorded, but a visiting Royal Navy officer in 1819 noted that, for the same breach of chastity, the Comtesse de Rosière, the white wife of the royal playwright Jules Chanlat, was obliged to ride through the streets of Sans-Souci in a state of perfect nudity at noonday on the back of a donkey with her face toward the tail. Despite the often capricious nature of these punishments, nobles could soon find themselves back in the king's good books once their sentence had been served. In August 1819, Richard was rewarded for his service to the kingdom by having his title of Duc de Marmelade made hereditary, a privilege that he appears to have previously been excluded from, despite the original 1811 edict that such titles could be inherited. In an extravagant display of royal largesse, 65 new counts, barons, and chevaliers were created that month, with 2 counts raised to dukedoms and the Dukes de Foréal and La Thibonite elevated to the rank of princes of the realm to fill the spaces left by the deaths of Christophe's brother-in-law and nephew. The new nobles were mostly serving army officers. It was the biggest shakeup of the ruling order since the formation of the monarchy and was promoted by another royal tour of the kingdom. This time, however, Christophe remained at the palace and sent the Prince Royal in his stead. In March 1819, his son had turned 15 and was now of legal age to inherit the throne, and the tour appeared designed to cement him as heir in the minds of the people. The itinerary included 2 weeks in the Artibonite Valley, the region closest to the disputed border with the Republic, and his son personally handed out many of the decorations to the newest members of the nobility and took their oaths of loyalty. "Behold, the well-beloved son of our good father. Behold, the dearest hope of Haiti," wrote the editor of the Royal Gazette of Haiti. In his description of the tour, he is already of an age to second the king and to partake of his fatigues and labors. As if to pave the way for his future ascension to the throne, his son visited the fort of Quetapéro to honor the bloody siege endured by Dessalines, fought 2 years before he was born, and paid the debts that were owed by several prisoners being held there so that they might be freed. In the nearby town of Petit-Rivière, he may also have overseen the choosing of a new site for a royal palace in his honor called Belle-Rivière, known locally today as Palais des 365 Portes, for its large number of doors and floor-to-ceiling windows. The expansion of the nobility went hand in hand with an equally significant extension of the land reform program. Despite having opened the sale of land to the wider public, Christophe announced himself grieved to find that a great many soldiers, because of lack of means, have not yet been able to share in the benefits arising from the sale of public land. Wishing to aid these champions to whom the nation owes a debt of gratitude and to help them find at the end of their days, amidst their infirmities, an honored security which they may pass on to their descendants, a royal edict announced a series of grants giving land directly to all soldiers who did not have any. The size of the land grants was dependent on the rank. Privates were given 1.3 hectares, with corporals getting double this, all the way to lieutenants and captains being given 8 to 10 hectares each. Colonels of each regiment were rewarded with 20 hectares. Of the 1,853 recorded land grants issued by the Crown that year, the overwhelming majority were single hectare plots given to enlisted men. Even a small 1 hectare plot could be enormously productive under the mixed cropping agriculture practice in Haiti, and it would not have escaped Christophe's detail-oriented mind that the grants made to enlisted men were of a similar size to the hidden farms cultivated by the kingdom's maroons. In the same way that the granting of new noble titles tied more army officers to the crown, the land reform project may have been designed in part to buy the loyalty of individual soldiers and reduce the chances of desertion. In a letter to an unnamed correspondent in September 1819, Huevaux said that grants had been given to 8,000 soldiers. Crucially, all of them were in the immediate surroundings of the Citadel. in a further suggestion that Christophe's attentions were focused inward. He also announced that Christophe was no longer supporting the continuing insurrection in Gandance. In February 1820, President Boyer triumphantly announced the complete pacification of Gandance. 12 years since Goman had taken up arms against Pétion, the Republic was finally a single unified state. Christophe may have indicated to Clarkson that he wished one day to shrink the size of his army, but with an increasingly confident Boyer on the southern border, it appeared that strengthening the loyalty of his soldiers to the crown would have to take precedence. January 1820 began with the royal performance of a new play called The King's Hunting Party by Justin Lac. The play opened in a forest glade where young women and soldiers of the Royal Daomets danced around a pyramid dedicated to Haitian independence, singing the praises of Papa Henri. A village teacher, probably played by Chanlat himself, then narrated the story of the love between a knight and a shepherd's daughter, who are united through their fidelity to their king. Christophe may have felt that he had earned such flattery. In his Independence Day speech that year, he praised the recent reforms that granted land to the brave men who defended the nation and announced that the opening of 6 new schools in the provinces would soon be followed by the establishment of colleges and universities. The continuing limbo over Haiti's status on the international stage was being addressed, thanks to its influential friends in Europe and beyond. Such liaisons, communications, and mutual and uninterrupted correspondences, he declared, were equivalent to the formal recognition of our independence. His speech also made particular reference to his beloved son, having entered his legal majority, and to the reception he had received on his tour of the Artibonite. Christophe said, "The testimonies of love and affection which you receive from our fellow citizens are the most precious reward which can touch the heart of a father and a sovereign." A portrait made of the king around this time paints a more complicated picture than the sunny optimism. In the painting, Christophe's face appears rounder and heavier. His eyes are hooded and heavily bagged, as there is more than a hint of white in his gray hair. The simple green coat of the 1816 portrait has been replaced by a scarlet uniform with a profusion of gold embroidery and braided epaulets. On his head is a similarly decorated bicorn, topped with red and black ostrich plumes. Christophe looks tired and possibly ill. Now, time out. 1820 is the beginning of the year 1820, so this is the final year of Christophe's life, right? 1820, that was when, Christophe fell. Christophe fell in 1820. Big Dog made his introduction back in 1767, but in 1820, that was when he fell. Now, I want to address a few things, right? Towards the end of Christophe's reign, it's my theory, right? It's just my theory. I believe that towards the end of Christophe's life, he might have been dealing with some mental illness. He might have been dealing with some mental problems. I mean, you remember earlier in the book, Christophe had got shot, back in 1802 during the French invasion. Christophe got shot in the head. That's one thing. Also, you're talking about somebody who seen the plantation system up close, right? Who really seen chattel slavery up close and personal, who been in so many wars, really battle hardened, literally been fighting wars from the age of 12 years old when he first stepped on the battlefield as a drummer boy for the French army until his last battle was probably back in 1812 against Alexander Pétion. So that's how many years of life. In 1812, he was how old? 45 years old. So that's approximately about 33 years where Christophe has military experience, battle-hardened experience, from 12 years old to 45 years old, right? From the American Revolution to the Haitian Revolution to the Haitian Civil War. Somebody who's seen so many of his comrades die. You got to understand at this point in 1820, Christophe is the last remaining general from the Haitian Revolution that signed the Act of Independence. Everybody else is dead. Dessalines is dead. Pétion is dead. Andre Vernet is dead. Clairvaux is dead. His brother-in-law, Noel, is dead. Boistonnerre is dead. And add on top of the fact that he's been living for the past, 10, 15, 20 years, constantly looking over his shoulder, never knowing the machinations and the schemes of the French, never knowing the French might try to arrive with the Armada and try to go to war once again, constantly living on the edge, not knowing what tomorrow may hold, not knowing if the enemy gonna attack. So that's my theory when they talk about how towards the end of Christophe's reign, he became more heavy-handed and erratic. I believe that Christophe was suffering from some mental issues, man. I believe Christophe probably had some PTSD, maybe some schizophrenia, who knows, right? Maybe some medical issues too, some high blood pressure, living with that level of stress for such a prolonged period of time, the constant stream of cortisol through the body, leading cavalry troops into battle, flying head first into a barrage of bullets. Christophe did that many a times. And I also remember when they talk about when he got shot in the head, I do believe that also might play a role too. I believe that there was definitely some residual damage back when Christophe got shot in the head back in 1802 when the French invaded, right? Now let's get back into it. Since 1815, there had been a small but growing commercial intercourse between the kingdom and Germany. Just as the English press had trumpeted the luxury goods bought for Christophe in London, there were reports of rich, damaged tablecloths and services for the table, brilliants, and pearls which had been paid for in ready money for the royal household ordered from Bremen, Bielefeld, and other Hanseatic cities. In 1815, Hamburg newspapers had even reported that the arrival of a Haitian envoy named General Lapé to explore commercial opportunities and possibly even open a diplomatic office. The Royal Gazette of Haiti refuted the story, saying that he was merely a private citizen traveling back to Haiti with his wife, reminding its readers that the king would never send an official mission without the precondition of Haitian independence. Nevertheless, when Lapé arrived in the capital, he was accompanied by a gardener for the palace and several musicians, and it was reported that he sought further Germans to work for Christophe, including a wood turner, a wool spinner, a dance tutor, and those with military experience. One soldier who traveled there was Lieutenant Gruntel, a Hessian Jew who served as Christophe's drill master for 4 years. A young Hanoverian vet named Otto Philip Brown found himself overseeing the construction of new stables at the palace on a salary of 1,200 Spanish dollars a year, rounding up wild horses for the king's stud, and dealing with the incessant attention of Prince Victor, whom he described as a horse lover extraordinaire. Other Germans met unhappier fates. Brown wrote home about the poor fate of the architect and family friend Ludwig Neuber, who was employed as a military engineer. He was accused of attempting to steal military plans and imprisoned on starvation rations before being executed. Even Johann Gottfried Eif reportedly died from very severe treatment at Haitian hands. The Haitian court also attempted to forge links with influential Germans. Van der Vasti exchanged letters with the Prussian academic Friedrich Wilhelm Gubitz, discussing social reform and education. Gubitz was also a talented artist and had been given a copy of the Code Henri by the Prussian consul in Bremen, along with a Haitian proposal that he might provide illustration to accompany a translated copy. For all this, close relations with Great Britain remained the kingdom's main goal. At the turn of 1820, a significant step forward appeared to have been taken when Admiral Sir Holmriggs Puffam, the commander of the Jamaica station, visited Christophe's capital. Sir Holmriggs Puffam was just 5 years older than Christophe, and his appointment as commander of the Caribbean fleet was the last in a long career in which he had won acclaim for devising the Navy signal code. In 1818, he had sent a ship to Port-au-Prince to monitor events following Pétion's death, and perhaps influenced by the views of English merchants there, wrote soon after to Vicomte Melville, the first Lord of Admiralty, that he believed Christophe to be an arbitrary savage, aiming at absolute monarchy, cruel in the extreme, and universally hated. Nevertheless, in May 1819, Melville directed Holmriggs Puffam to make a fact-finding mission to the kingdom and to call on Christophe directly. The delegation was received by a guard of honor and taken by carriage to a house allocated for their stay that was uncommonly clean, well furnished, and provided with a library and plenty of servants. After the English merchants in the capital had paid their respects, Jean-Pierre Richard hosted a reception for the party where, in the words of the Royal Gazette of Haiti, the most free and the greatest cordiality reigned between the English and the Haitian officers. The following day, the visitors toured the schools, the hospital, and several sites relating to the desperate battles against the French during the Revolution. The Haitians feel an honest pride pointing out these places, rendered sacred by their heroic achievements, noted the lieutenant. Christophe arrived at the palace in the capital on a third day accompanied by his son. Everything about the meeting was designed to impress. The entrance to the palace is both handsome and convenient, wrote the lieutenant. The more one sees of this interesting country, the more one admires the man whose strong mind, tireless conduct, and great natural abilities have brought his subjects, previously sunk in the most degrading slavery, to so high a state of order and even refinement. Christophe was judged even more impressive in person. His hair is perfectly gray, his countenance very intelligent, and his whole person well proportioned. His manners are particularly pleasing, without the slightest appearance of affection or arrogance. In contrast, his son was one of the most fattest fellows I ever saw, who looked 10 years older than his age of 15, but who was nevertheless a good-natured, boisterous lad, who wore his court dress handsomely, down to the large plume of ostrich feathers in his hat. The king thanked Holmriggs Puffam for a visit he had long wished for, and paid him the compliment of saying that his signal code had been adopted by the Haitian Navy. The meeting lasted for 4 hours and ended with Christophe in high spirits, speaking in a witty refrain and laughing heartily at the malevolence of the French, who make a ridiculous practice of inventing the most ridiculous stories about him. As their king retired to the palace, the Haitian side reported with great pleasure that the admiral had been very well pleased with the particular attention he received from His Majesty. The Haitian trauma offensive worked wonders on Henri's Puffam. He sent a long report to Melville on what he had been able to learn about the size of the Haitian army and labor force, the state of agriculture, the freedoms allowed to its people, important intelligence gathering for an imperial power that had abolished the slave trade but had yet to commit to abandoning slavery itself. In his covering letter, Henri's Puffam fell short of recommended recognition of Haiti, but became the first British official to refer to Christophe as a king. He also noted the lively commerce being carried on between Haiti and the Danish colony of St. Thomas, suggesting that a commercial agreement between Britain and Haiti so that British vessels could undercut the trade. Christophe wrote to Clarkson of the personal audience he had given to Henri's Puffam in a matter befitting his rank, and correctly surmised that a full report of the visit will make its way back to the British government. The letter mentioned another visit 2 months after Henri's Puffam when the HMS Tartar pulled into Christophe's capital. Its commander was George Collier, who led the Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron, charged with enforcing the British ban on the slave trade. Christophe was particularly fascinated by the fate of the enslaved Africans on the ships indicted by Collier's fleet. They were disembarked in Freetown, where Christophe clearly saw parallels with the state he had built from the ashes of Saint-Domingue, noting that he gave us very gratifying information concerning the progress towards civilization which our African brothers in Sierra Leone are making, to my great satisfaction. To him we learned then that our friends are forging ahead, and we continue to hope that all their efforts will be crowned with success. Christophe decided that the time was finally right to make his own approach to France, rather than wait for whatever the government there might try to agree with General Boyer. At the end of 1819, he wrote to Clarkson to ask him to make overtures to Paris in the hopes of opening negotiations for a peace treaty, and instructed Prevost to accredit him with full diplomatic credentials affixed with his royal seal. Clarkson was given carte blanche to proceed as he saw fit. Christophe said, "There is no need for us to indicate to a friend as informed and wise as yourself the essentials on which we must insist in a projected treaty. You know as well as we do the points on which we can never yield, because you are fully aware of the best interests of Haiti." Christophe said, "Haiti must be recognized as a free, sovereign, and independent nation. Her commerce must be free, and the demands of the ex-colonists should be abandoned." In March 1820, before Christophe could learn of Clarkson's progress, he received a second visit from Sir Henri's Puffam. This time, his son was given a more prominent ceremonial role and conducted a parade of 9 regiments of foot and dismounted cavalry. After a royal reception, Christophe hosted a breakfast where the guests were served on the most superb English china, with light wines, claret, and preserved fruits. One anonymous Navy officer noted his surprise that, though the service appeared in all manners French, the food was more substantial, though at the same time more mysterious than the products of Parisian cookery. The following day, the British were taken inland by carriage so that the king could show off his palace at Sans Souci. "We wandered with black maids of honor over lawns smiling with the richest and softest beauty," wrote the officer in a memoir published 30 years later. "We were served by footmen in the royal livery of blue and black, with thin shoes and silk stockings. I still remember the grizzled head of Christophe as he rose to speak, and being overcome with some thought, passed his hand before his forehead and sat down while the breeze was sighing audibly in the thick foliage outside an adjoining open window." After departing the capital, Sir Henri's Puffam sailed directly to Port-au-Prince to offer his services as a peace broker between the North and the South. It was his first meeting with Boyer, with whom he had recently been in a dispute over the case of the Flying Fish, a Jamaican vessel whose enslaved sailors had fled to Port-au-Prince and whose extradition the Southern authorities refused. Perhaps because of this, Sir Henri's Puffam found himself disinclined to enjoy good relations with Boyer despite the lavish reception he received. He presented himself as a guarantor of Christophe's sincere and peaceful intentions, but had been so won over by the hospitality shown to him on his 2 visits that he went as far as referring to Christophe in his letter as the king. This was a victory for Christophe, but it hardly presented Puffam as a neutral observer, a point that was underlined when he warned Boyer against taking any aggressive action towards the kingdom. Boyer's reply was unsurprisingly bullish. It was 3 months since he had declared his final victory over Goman, and he confidently predicted that Christophe would be the next to fall. He said, "In less than a year, his reign of terror will be ended, and the Haitians of the Artibonite in the north will be once more united with their brothers in the west and the south." Boyer even suggested that Christophe's army was not so impressive as it had appeared on the parade ground to the British. "When he came as far as St. Mark last year, he did not dare to cross our frontier. His troops would have deserted him and joined ranks with ours." Amid all this came Clarkson's reply to Christophe's proposal to approach France. After consulting with Wilberforce and James Stephen, Clarkson concluded that now was not the time to approach France. It was his official appointment that proved a stumbling block, because were the French cabinet to receive him as an ambassador for Christophe, they would be acknowledging Haitian independence before negotiations even begun. Christophe's proposals might even be seen as a sign of Haitian weakness, given his uncompromising response to the La Veste and Fortange missions back in 1814 and 1816. This sudden change from austere inflexibility to a voluntary yielding on your part, so as to even send an envoy to that very court whose messengers you twice refused to receive, would make you be considered by the French government as a humble supplicant for peace, a situation of which they would directly take advantage, either by means of some well-concerted plan of intrigue or by an open invasion or blockade of your dominion. Clarkson caused Christophe even more dismay by telling him that the French government would demand more than just free trade in return for recognition. Clarkson said, "Unless you can offer something more to France, all hope of a treaty is at an end." Christophe will be better served by consolidating his rule and pursuing unofficial contacts. With these objections stated, Clarkson drew £300 from his Haitian funds and set out for Paris to gather information as a private individual. On the chances of French recognition of Haiti, Clarkson was explicit. He said, "The Minister of the Marine in the colonies has no objection to make a treaty with your Majesty and General Boyer on very favorable terms, provided you would acknowledge the King of France as your nominable sovereign, nor would he refuse, I believe, even to acknowledge the independence of Haiti, but then he would make you pay very dearly for it." Louis XVIII would only make a treaty with Christophe, and even then, recognition would be dependent on the payment of an indemnity and an exclusive trading deal lasting up to 50 years. Clarkson apologized for bearing such news, recognizing that the conditions are too degrading and too burdensome to be submitted to, and that even were Christophe prepared to make such a sacrifice, he would be better to wait until the political winds in France had changed to find better terms. Clarkson recommended a number of steps that Christophe could take to bolster his position. Firstly, the kingdom should continue its program of land and army reform and do everything it can to increase the population by encouraging African American immigration. Everything should be done to avoid conflict with Boyer or give the appearance of interfering with the affairs of neighboring slave islands for fear of attracting unwanted foreign attention. It was a policy that might take years to bear fruit, but Clarkson was convinced it was the only way forward. Regrettably, Christophe's response to the advice was never recorded. On the 15th of August 1820, two very different cataclysms struck both North and South Haiti. An enormous fire swept through Port-au-Prince, destroying more than 250 buildings before it was put under control. The blaze was blamed on provocateurs sent by Christophe in revenge for the conquest of Gondans. A few days later, stories began to circulate that Christophe had been struck down by illness and paralyzed. Few believed it, but for once the rumors were true. As Port-au-Prince burned, Christophe and the royal court were traveling to the palace of Bellevue-les-Rois in Limonade to celebrate Queen Marie-Louise's fête. At a mass held in the town's church, Christophe's eyes suddenly turned glassy, and he slumped into his seat, with his hands twitching so violently that he struck the queen's lapdog with his cane. As those around him became aware of his condition, Christophe reportedly cried out in the name of the former Archbishop Brel, asking if others could see the ghostly figure that had appeared before him. Before anyone could answer, he lost consciousness and collapsed onto the floor. As the murmuring in the congregation turned to cries for help, the royal children formed a protective cordon around their father and waited anxiously for the arrival of the king's doctor. We'll be back for part 12.
No, feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders, you know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife, yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city, they loving me. Standing alone, I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They try to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I been gated away. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drop a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders, you know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife, yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news.